Welcome everybody to the Mids Watch. We've got another episode for you. You're going to love this one. This is two themes that came out of this one that are very important. First is to own the frame you have and not the frame you want. And the second theme, and this is one that's super important to anybody who's working on their male action plan, or in a dead bedroom situation, or just in a marriage that's been struggling and you want to make efforts to fix it. So for most married red pill guys, they say you can't fix the marriage. The marriage is a woman's job to fix, but you can fix the man. And so guys do that. They fix the man, they make themselves worth a damn, and then once you start providing value, it's amazing how people around you want to provide value to keep you in their life. But the common thread on these is a guy will start to think to himself, it's like, okay, my wife never used to want to smash and she treated me like a plow horse. And now that I've got my act together and she's in love with me and everything is back to the way it should be, and this is great, except for I don't like her anymore. And I'm here to tell you that's absolutely a common thing. And you're going to see a nice field report here from a guy who kind of did that. The first thing to note is, again, you guys are noticing a consistent theme here. A guy comes in with the worst problems ever. And he throws his life on the table. He says, here's my Batman origin story and what do I do about it? Somebody gives him heartfelt examples from other guys in the past, how to swap some notes, how to fix your life. And then the guy says thanks, deletes his account. No idea if it worked for him or not, because chances are these kind of guys just kind of let life happen anyway. And this was like no different than any other fad diet they got on. So we're going to see, and I've been trying to find an archive of the thing, but it just doesn't exist. So we're going to try and find what his original message was based on the responses from it. I kind of remember it myself, but it'll be a fun little exploration for you guys. So Jack starts off with commenting, instead of getting fitness tests and comfort tests, all these tests now to me become shitty comfort tests. And that's because, and Jack's like, and that's because you have zero captain or oak in your response. Stoic? Sure. But that's not what your wife wants. She doesn't want what she says she wants either, but she doesn't just want an unresponsive and evasive husband who keeps walking out of the room. You somehow have the insight, unlike many men, to realize criticism from their anxious wives comes from a place of fear, yet you act ignorant of that fear. You absolutely should not placate that fear and bend over backwards and do whatever they want, but your responses will just ensure increasingly more shitty comfort tests. Some quick definitions here. So if you don't know what the captain means, the captain refers to a captain first officer model. It was popularized by, I want to say, Athol Kay, but don't quote me on that one. And the idea was, as the captain of a ship, the ship being the relationship, you're ultimately responsible for everything that happens underneath. Now, the captain's not the one swabbing the deck and doing all the work, so he has to delegate out accordingly. The wife, on the other hand, or the girlfriend, or the significant other in this case, is the trusted first officer. And the idea there is she gets a say, she gets, input. She's not incompetent. She's perfectly competent, but you get to veto things if you don't think it's going to work out for everybody. It's an idea of like extreme ownership, but everybody loves extreme ownership when Rocco Wilnick says it, but he said it with a bunch of married dudes on the internet, and now it's misogynist. So here we are. And the oak, when I say stoic isn't topic of this thing, what I mean here is that the oak is what you're trying to be, but guys keep mistaking it for stoicism because every douche on the internet keeps talking about stoicism. The oak is like the oak tree. There's an old post, I have to go dredge it up there, where it's, you're like an oak tree, and the wind hits you, and you move a bit in the wings, you buffer around a little bit, maybe a fire happens, you lose some leaves, but the oak is still there. As opposed to being stoic, where you're trying to be like a rock. Everything just bounces off you, nothing affects you. The problem is, the oak acknowledges the world around it, but it doesn't move. It's steadfast. And that's kind of where you want to be, as opposed to being stoic, which is just nothing ever affects you. You're like a hunk of wood. Nobody cares. And that's not really useful because this is a relationship after all. And girls kind of feed off of actions and reactions and reading people, that sort of thing. So if you're just not reacting at all, you're essentially checked out of the relationship. And you're sending a very strong signal that it's over. And in this case, his wife tends to respond to him with really crappy comfort tests because she's basically terrified that this relationship is coming to an end, even though she used to take it for granted. So that'll help you here if you understand those things there. Oh, and then just the difference between a shitty comfort test and a normal comfort test is whether a girl has decent relationship strategies of her own. Like a comfort test is where she's not sure of her place in your life, and so she throws out some test to gauge commitment. A shitty comfort test is a really shitty way of doing it. That's all that is. Anyways, he quotes the op again, so I decided to poke the hamster with a hot iron. The hamster in this case makes a reference to how girls' emotions are like a hamster running on a spinning wheel, spending a lot of effort getting nothing done. And then Jack's like, you know what, that's ridiculous. Like, you decided? Really? Really? You decided to poke the hamster with a hot iron? Like, no. You got sick of your anxious wife constantly giving you shit, and you called her out on it, then claimed the moral high ground and shut down the conversation when she used personal insults. And you seem to be enjoying this tactic a lot, and I'm pretty sure this is based on a comment on your previous post, and I know why. And he's going to reference that one too. He's like, the guy said, like, you know, I doubt that it's really about her and more about your own choice in making a lifelong commitment to such a creature. Go ahead and check out completely. And the guy's like, oh, fuck. That's what I have to say about all that. Good point. Again, it's like literally that bad single 20-year-old guy hearing about a guy with a marriage of 15 years. And you're like, yeah, my wife did this one thing. What do I do about it? And he's like, just next the bitch. And you're like, dude, it's been 15 years. We got 2 kids, a mortgage, and a pension. Like, surely there's a tactic in between here and there. But, you know, the 20-year-old kid doesn't give a shit. They're naive as hell. But they're like, yeah, why wouldn't you just ditch everything? I have no attachments. You're like, all right, slow down, kid. Let's get in there. And continuing on here, though, Jack's like, it's pretty clear you don't think your wife is worth the effort it takes for you to lead in your marriage. But leadership requires more than stoicism and not giving a fuck. It requires more than just shutting down. Shitty comfort tests and figuring out she'll get the message all on her own. She needs to drop the shit if she wants comfort. But come on, man. That's just naive. You're shoving all of her anxiety in her face, calling that frame, and assuming somehow that air of faux superiority will turn her into a sweet, surrendered wife. And then he kind of references to the op at one point. He's like, yeah, I can read her behavior like a book. He's like, I'm sure you can. Because I'm sure you used to be, like a lot of guys here, little blue pill, beta bitch who was raised in his formative years to develop some unhealthy codependent traits. That codependency meant you put away too much self-worth into making other people feel good, but it also meant you knew how to make other people feel good. You knew how to express sincerity, how to placate anxiety, reduce fear, and inspire joy. And the ability to do this stuff is not some weak beta male shit either. It's only when you use these things at the expense of your own joy, or when you do it expecting it to be sexually attractive, that when it becomes weak beta shit. Again, I keep telling guys on here when they talk about alpha and beta, and they're like, yeah, alpha is good, beta is bad. This is strong, this is weak. And I'm like, you're not getting it. Alpha is attraction. Alpha makes a girl want to have sex with you. Beta is comfort. Beta is what makes the girl want to make you breakfast the next morning. And so when you start thinking about these as tools as opposed to like value systems, this all starts to make sense. In this case, the guy had way too many comfort tools. He's finally decided that, you know, the attraction ones are ones he's let aside for too long. He's working on them. Now he's getting them, but the wife has anxiety because she doesn't know where she stands in this new life. A guy's completely changed. And, you know, if you're a wife that all of a sudden out of nowhere started going to the gym 6 days a week and going out with your friends to the bar, that usually means she's checked off. She's checked out and she's going to find somebody else. So from a girl's standpoint, when a guy starts doing these things, she just assumes he is too, even though he just wants to make his marriage and life a little bit better. But that's the thing. He knows all this, but he's ignoring it because he's kind of reveling in that I get to teach her a lesson. Because he doesn't like her anymore. And that was what I said before, the common issue. You take up red pill, you fix your stuff, and then you realize you just don't like your wife anymore. In this case, it's literally him trying to get revenge for however many years of a lackluster marriage he's had. And that's, I don't think it's fair. It's not frame. I'll put it that way. Like, if your wife really was that bad and you can't move past it, just leave. But the sitting there getting the revenge for it, it's not the best use of your time. And all it is just dragging things along. Jack continues here. It's like, why do you think your wife married you? Well, because you were an empathic person, and that's what someone with an anxiety disorder needs. When your wife is giving you a shitty comfort test saying things like, I don't trust you, or anymore, and you can say, well, that's not my problem. Or you can say, like, look, it's hard for anybody to trust other people. I want you to trust me, and I think things will turn out well for us if you do. I'm going to do things that make you anxious, and you're going to want me to stop doing them so you can stop being anxious. You're just going to have to trust me more than your anxiety. Brilliant line, by the way. And he points out, like, out of those two options, option 2 utilizes a bunch of fogging and is the oak statement. But like I said, you're an empathic guy, right? You already knew it was an option to say stuff like that in your arguments, but for some reason, you think red pill means you get to stop saying that because, let's be honest, the conversation wouldn't end with that. Her hamster would still run, and you still have to repeat some version of it and do what they call broken record. I know it's hard, but you need to trust me instead of your anxiety. Look, I know it's hard, but you need to trust me instead of your anxiety. I know it's hard, but you need to trust me instead of your anxiety. Say it a few different times. When she gets defensive of said anxiety and decides to redirect it to your own personal failings or previous events where she did and it messed up. But if you don't do that, your answer is number 1, then it's not like she's going to condition herself to stop doing this anyway. Like, let me be clear. I don't think this was a main event. And yeah, we'll take a pause here. When he's talking about, like, these things are pretty dense. I hate how I have to explain like 30 minutes of explanation for a 10-minute post, but we're at where we're at. A main event is at the tail end of a good percentage of guys' male action plans. Becoming red-pilled, working on your relationship, or working on yourself within your relationship. What happens is a girl will build up a level of anxiety, a level of potential loss. It's dread. That's why it was called dread, because they tend to dread it. Then what happens at a certain point where a girl truly does not know how to manage being in the life of a guy that she sees is on the up, and no girl wants to get off the moving train. So this comes out as the mother of all comfort tests. Snot bubbles, crying, I don't know what I need to do to make you happy anymore. It's essentially like a huge blowout because it's a girl using direct language saying, I want you in my life and I don't know how to get there. And that's usually when the dynamic of the relationship switches from a female dominant one or equal to a male dominant one. And that's usually where a guy has, and there's a thing in there called the coming to Jesus speech, but that's another topic for another day. Let's just hold to this thing here. An intense and confrontational argument, sure. But you're just going to have one the next day, and the next week, and the next month. He couldn't remember half the girls he had slept with. What was the point if he couldn't remember them? Maintain frame and she'll get hysterical, and you use her hysteria as a reason to ignore her cries for comfort. And this will continue until she can't take it anymore and then asks for a divorce. Because I'm pretty sure you started repeating, that's not my problem, or this conversation is over, and it's not going to help anybody overcome this literal diagnosed mental disorder and become the sweet and fit and high self-esteemed wife you want. And that is what you want, right? It's always kind of funny. Guys keep thinking there, keep pouring more alpha on it, keep sprinkling a little alpha on it. And that's the case there. This guy did nothing but sprinkle alpha on his marriage to its detriment. Like at some point you need to add some beta, some comfort. The problem is most guys have absolutely no alpha in their relationship, and so you end up with these very lackluster marriages, which it's fine. Add some alpha to that, but you got to calibrate. You can't just go 100. You can't go from the plow horse to like the Chad destroyer of worlds and then expect your marriage not to blow up. Now, if that's what you want, that's great. But if that's what you want, you wouldn't need to be doing these weird torture examples that he uses, where he says he doesn't care about her anxiety turns into hysteria, and then he uses it as a cudgel to hit her with. Like I said, it's where is his frame there? And right now it's being like, I'm going to teach that bitch a lesson for being so mean to me all these years. You got better things to do with your time. He makes reference to the op then talking about how your wife is your mirror, which is true. And this is back to the point where I said a lot of guys will do their red pill map, and then they find that they just don't like their wife anymore. It turns out the reason that happens is because it's a mirror effect. Turns out your ego realizes, and this is one thing you realize when most guys go from a period of like destitution to a period of success, they're like, why didn't I do this earlier? And they look back at all those years prior and they see it as a giant failure. But because our egos don't let us think poorly of ourselves, it's not our failure, it's that bitch's failure. And they look at her and it's like, that's your fault. And that's where that hate comes from. A lot of girls praise that as misogyny, but it's like, no, man, it's like literally a guy processing his demons. I think Bill Burr had a great sketch on that. He's like, whatever happened to those girls that just realized it wasn't about them? And in this case, the mirror and not liking your wife, it's not about them. It's about you. And eventually guys get over it. But you just have to understand why it's there, right? So if you think your wife's shitty comfort tests are somehow a reflection that you've been doing too much weak stuff and you need to act like more of a shithead, then I think you got the wrong end of the stick here. You're just wearing this my way or the highway attitude and not even giving her any guidance about what your way even is, or why you only want her to take the highway if she can't trust you instead of her anxiety. And again, the guy knows all this. He's literally not hearing anything new. He's phrasing things a little more eloquently, maybe, but none of this is sparking any gestalt moments here. And if you can admit that, then hopefully you're honest enough to admit yourself this. Your behavior is driven because you're sick of your wife's anxiety disorder, and she's become a fat and unattractive and mostly unredeeming quality person, and you think you can probably do better. So yet, what's stopping you from owning that? No kids? Both work, so divorce would mean just splitting up some assets and calling it a day, right? Well, what's stopping you? Well, you, Mr. Used to be codependent and is still codependent enough to realize that asking her for a divorce would literally devastate her. She'd quite possibly have a panic attack on the spot, as you've reinforced her every fear that she's just an unlikable and unlovable person. The one person who sort of convinced her that case wasn't true was you, are throwing in the towel. And I'm sure you're perceiving an air of judgment in these last few sentences, so let me be clear. Your wife does not get a free pass because she has a diagnosed mental illness. If she wants to remain in the commitment, she does have a responsibility to hold up her end of the marital commitment, including being attractive, kind, treating her mental illness with whatever combination of therapy and medicine are required, and all I'm saying is, you're demonstrating zero leadership about this. You're not demonstrating any guidance on what you consider attractive and kind, and what behaviors from her would get attractive and kind behaviors from you. And I'm saying you're not doing that because that would take work. Probably a lot of work. And it's a lot easier for you just to act like a shithead and figure she'll spontaneously kill her hamster and drop 40 pounds, or you'll drive her into enough hysterics that she'll ask for a divorce, and you, Mr. Used to be codependent but clearly sort of still codependent, don't need to be the bad guy. And Op kind of carries on here with, I feel good, honestly. There's times when I just want to say, get the hell out of here, but I'm not going to show any more emotion than I have to. See preface to anxiety, to keep the wife in check. And Jack's like, let me make one more analogy here. The way you're acting, it's like you and your wife are tied together with ropes, sitting on wooden chairs on top of a puddle of gasoline, and you just lit that gasoline on fire. And you're now pretty much just saying, well, you can get us out, or we and our marriage will just burn up in this flame. Either way, I don't give a shit, so I'm just going to sit here and enjoy the show. And in all likelihood, she won't be able to save you both from the fire, and you could smugly say, well, we're burnt to a crisp, but she could have gotten out and she didn't. She won't see it that way, but it doesn't matter. So realize, if your wife really does have a diagnosed anxiety disorder from a medical professional, that she is probably incapable of smoothly getting you both out of that fire. She'll probably get really desperate, break her thumbs to escape the rope, and then chew through the rope to get you out, but that desperation will seem like you have the hamster working for you, except that it'll be 100% motivated by anxiety. You're sick of her prioritizing her fears over you, but your approach, if it succeeds, will ensure she behaves the way you want because she now fears you over her other fears. There's no virtuous red pill cycle of two people acting in another's best interest because that person adds value to the other person's life. That it's also in their own best interest to do so. No, it's just driving your wife to be anxious to the point where she just succumbs and does whatever you say because she's terrified you'll disapprove otherwise. Obligated desire or negotiated desire only leads to obligated compliance, and that's not what you want. That's the same argument that a lot of chicks make. It's like, well, if incels couldn't get laid, why don't they just get prostitutes? And you're just like, it's not about the sex. And in this case, it's not about the relationship. He wants the wife to be a good wife, but she is mentally incapable of getting there. And because he's treating this as like a revenge fantasy, he has no desire to lead her towards it. With the other part of it being, that takes work. And right now it's very easy for him just to be a smug asshole and turn his alpha up. It's not so easy to add some leadership to that, to guide her from it. And that's a lot of being like the captain in this model, or the oak, is that you're not just sitting here being as alpha as possible and then she'll do whatever you want her to do. You actually have to tell her how to provide value to your life. Now, I don't know how old this girl is. Maybe she's 30, maybe she's 40, maybe she's 23. I don't know. Here's the point. Most girls suck at relationship strategies. I think Rollo had an article on it where the modern girl just thinks, be naked, bring beer. That's girl game. And they don't realize there's more to it than that. So since there's nobody out there telling girls how to be women anymore, there's no guys out there telling men how to be men anymore, we got this here. This is how you do the stuff. This is how you sort your marriage out. This is the goals you might want it to consider. Again, what does Op want? If she's unredeemable, be the bad guy. Leave it at the altar. All right, we're done. We tried. Not going to happen. You're a lost cause. But own that. Own the frame you have and not the one you want. If he thinks that, he wants to lead this, then that's great. So lead it. Show her the things that it takes to be a good person. Reward good behavior. Don't reward bad behavior. We talk about these tools. I have it in the sidebar series on this video. You can check out the channel if you want. Broken record, fogging, amuse mastery, agree and amplify, negative inquiry. All these tools are leadership tools. If your wife's having an anxiety attack towards you, sometimes it's just a matter of fogging. Acknowledge the anxiety without validating it. Provide a life raft. Hey, trust me more than your anxiety. Things will all work out in the end. I've said it as much in my own during my map. It was, I'm going to be a selfish prick moving off once I leave the military. But you know what? It's going to be fun. And if you're on board, I'm all for having you. Sometimes that's all it takes. Of course, you can't really get there without that shit ton of work killing all the demons in your past. And part of that is this report where a guy no longer likes his wife because she reflects his previous failures at him. And this is where Op is at. So yeah, I love these reports, by the way, because this is, when people talk about red pill being great, this, then that, people are very embarrassed and they do not like talking about the real shit like this. So the fact that we still have some snapshots of these guys having these real situations, like I guarantee, out of the 50 guys you've seen brag about how red pill has saved their marriage, probably all 50 of them have a really embarrassing story like this, where they've really screwed up because they're not congruent with their own goals. They don't understand the terminology, they don't understand the concepts, but they're getting there. And luckily enough, like some guys will have other men to help them through it, swapping notes, and that's where you're getting here. So we're going to finish this one off with the last piece where the guy makes an edit later on. He's like, look, I'm in no way an expert. I get it. I still have a lot to learn. And I'm sure people will point out how things could have gone differently. To which Jack very flippantly is like, yeah, no shit. Look, all you need to figure out is whether you still give a shit about your marriage or not. If you do, then all of those shitty comfort tests are easily passed when you frame it like this. I know you're scared and you trust your fear more than me. But if you start trusting me, I think you're going to see better outcomes than you've gotten by trusting your fear. And if you're incapable of trusting me, then so be it. But I can't be in a marriage where my wife doesn't trust me over her fear, and thus expects me to never take any action that would cause that fear, no matter how irrational. That's frame right there. That one statement sets the tone for everything that follows, all the decisions. There's actually a term for this too. It's called a deep narrative. Because I'm sure you guys have heard me talk about mental models on the channel, basically a narrative structure that allows you to anchor your decisions. What would Jesus do is a great example of that. A deep narrative is something that runs underneath all of your mental models. And this is the one here that he's saying, I'm willing to put in work. I'm willing to put up with your bullshit. I just need to know that you're going to trust me more than your anxiety. And if a girl's making that effort, that's what he's taken as investment, and then he can invest back. Again, it's just like, used to be pickup, talking about the 2/3 rule, right? Give her 2/3 of what she gives you. There's an example of it playing out in a fucking marriage. Like, welcome to red pill, man. There's no bravado here. There's no catchphrases. There's not sprinkling alpha on it. Well, here, this is like real shit that works. So enjoy it. And he carries on here. You're talking to the op about maintaining frame, and that it's your frame, dude. Over time, she'll find comfort in that frame because it's consistent. She'll learn to trust the new red-pilled you. But yeah, it's going to take time and it's going to take work. You're going to have to prove your own competence over amount of time proportional to your, drunk captain period. If you guys don't know, that's another one about, there usually is like 3 or 4 different archetypes of guys in struggling relationships. And we call them the drunken captain models. The idea of the captain, the first officer, which we talked about before. So it'll be a while before she trusts your guidance for her own self-improvement. But if it doesn't work, well, the beauty of this is you did try. So you can end the marriage and feel like you were really being a constructive and positive person, and you're both just incapable of giving each other what's needed to be respectively happy. Just avoid knocking her up in the meantime, and you'll be able to end the marriage a lot easier than the divorce rate nightmares that you hear on the main red pill sub that they love to talk about. They always got to give little jabs to the single guys, man. But if the idea of putting in that level of time and effort is distasteful to you, totally understandable. We get it. And all I'm advocating is that you own it, which means that your frame should really be, I have no more confidence in your ability to fulfill the marriage I want, so it's over. So instead of your current frame, which is something like, I have no more confidence in your ability to fulfill the marriage I want, but I know asking for a divorce would devastate you, and I would feel really bad about that. Even though I don't feel bad about generally acting like a shithead and figure out you'll either step up or initiate the formal termination, and that's probably because I'm filled with so much resentment towards you for causing me so much anguish over the years while I've tried to placate your every fear, only to end up with an even more anxious wife who's now a fat ass to boot. It's not that easy, but it is that simple. So some final thoughts on this one before we let it go. The part I love about this stuff is, I think Rollo has an article on this one about killing the puppy, or Please Break Up With Me, I think it's called, yeah. Where he talks about girls don't break relationships. Girls will just act shittier and shittier and shittier, or they'll cheat on you and all this stuff to make you do it because they don't want to be the bad guy. Reputation is sacrosanct in a woman's mind. So if they can somehow get you to break up with them, they're the good person, you're the bad person, and that's all that matters. And you know I've been telling you guys plenty of times that men are being raised as defective women. And it sounds cool, and it's a catchy phrase, and it makes for a good tweet, but this is exactly what I'm talking about. This guy was raised as a defective woman. And in this case, he doesn't want to be in the relationship, or he does. We never do find out which way he wants. Not that it really matters, because the answer's the same either way. Pick a frame and own it. So what he does instead is he tries to punish her. In his mind, he's not thinking, I'm going to be as shitty a person as possible and then she'll leave me. That's not how people think about it. He has to delude himself into thinking, yeah, if I just act like a stoic, like I'm better than she is, and then I shit on her every time she gets mad at me, even though she's got anxiety. It's basically like, beating up the mentally handicapped kid and then running a victory lap. But yeah, gets revenge for all those times that she treated me like crap, makes me feel great. I don't have to look in the mirror anymore because it's not me. I'm great. It's her. She was the problem. And then he's so focused on how he feels, he's not focusing on what he wants for an outcome. For a lot of guys, that's common. They sit there and they go, and you tell them, like, what do you want? It's like, and they'll just say something simple like, I want my wife to sleep with me more, or I want more blowjobs, or whatever. And you're just like, okay, you get that part sorted out. For all I know, his sex life might be good now, if he wants it. But once that's out of the way, you realize that was just an excuse, a buffer. And then you're going to get through more and more buffers. But then at the core of it, it's really that. He wants a girl that's invested in him, that acts like she gives a shit. And he doesn't have that right now. But he's not willing to accept that and own it because he might be the bad guy in somebody else's story if he acts on it. And again, part of being a man is not being a woman. And in this case, you need to be okay being the bad guy in your story. And if you don't want to be the bad guy in it, and you think this thing is salvageable, then yeah, you got to lead towards that too. Again, be the captain. You may not be the good guy in that story either. She's having an anxiety attack and you're like, you need to trust me and don't worry about the anxiety. It's going to happen. It involved you eating a lot of shit. Nobody ever said it was going to be easy. Nobody ever said you were going to get rewarded. But if you want to succeed, you sometimes have to ignore how you feel about these things and just get going. So I hope you enjoyed this one. Stick around, we got a ton more coming, and I will catch you guys on the next one. Cheers.